It started with just a few words, a sentence, maybe two, but they landed like thunder, crashing through a silence that had never been questioned before. And ever since that moment, they haven't slept. Not a single peaceful night. Tossing, turning, haunted by what you said. Not because it was cruel, not because it was loud, but because it was true. This is a story about a silence that roared louder than any scream, and a truth that cracked a mask wide open. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll realize why some people fear the truth more than any lie. The night had barely settled over the quiet town when Ion stood at the edge of the hallway, watching her. She didn't know he was there. She never really did. She only noticed when she needed something. A ride, a favor, a shoulder. But tonight wasn't about her needs. Tonight was about what she deserved. He had always been the quiet one in the group, the one people vented to, leaned on, laughed with, but rarely checked on. Not once did anyone stop to think that behind his calm gaze, there were storms. Behind his supportive nods, there were stories no one had time to hear. And she, Zara, was the crown jewel of that ignorance. She had always assumed he'd be there. Always, like a backup plan, like a habit. For years, he endured the passive insults masked as jokes. The "you wouldn't understand" comments. The "you're too nice for your own good." He took it all, not because he was weak, but because he had something most people didn't: restraint. The kind that only breaks when you finally had enough. And that moment came, the day she walked up to him with eyes full of tears, asking for advice. Not because she wanted the truth, but because she wanted comfort. "I just don't know what to do anymore," she'd said. "People keep betraying me, using me. I feel like I'm the only real one left." Ion had smiled, not because he found it funny, but because it was ironic. And then he said it, calmly, clearly, quietly, the sentence that now kept her up every single night. "Maybe you're just upset because I'm not the one you can use anymore." That was it. No screaming, no pointing fingers, just clarity, served colder than revenge. Her mouth had opened slightly, stunned. She looked for anger in his face, maybe bitterness. But there was none. There was only truth, dripping like ice water down her spine. In that single moment, her image of him shattered. Not because he became someone new, but because he revealed who he had always been. Someone who saw everything, every manipulation, every false apology. Every time she pretended not to notice his silence, just to make herself feel better. Zara didn't sleep that night, or the night after, or the ones that followed. Because truth, when it comes from someone you underestimated, hits harder, especially when you realize they're done caring. What haunted her wasn't the sentence itself. It was a realization that he had finally seen her, not the version she put on display for the world, but the real her, the one even she didn't want to admit existed. Days passed. She kept checking her phone, expecting maybe a follow-up message, a call, a clarification. But none came. Silence became louder than any confrontation she'd ever had. She started replaying every memory with him. Every moment she brushed off his value. Every time she reached out only when she needed validation, not connection. And worst of all, every time he gave it without ever asking for anything in return. Regret is a cruel companion. It whispers when you want peace. It drips poison into your thoughts just when you're trying to convince yourself you're the victim. Zara tried to rationalize it. He's overreacting. But deep down she knew he wasn't overreacting. He was finally reacting. She remembered the way he looked at people, not with judgment, but with depth, as if he could see past their words and into their intentions. And still, he always gave them a chance. Until now, Zara's face began to change. Not on the outside, but within. She avoided mirrors, conversations, crowds, because all she could think of was how someone like Ion, someone so observant, had finally decided she wasn't worth the patience anymore. She started losing focus at work, lost sleep, lost appetite, and not because she missed him, but because she missed the version of herself she pretended to be when she was around him, the version he once believed in. She didn't know it yet, but the true storm wasn't his absence. It was her confrontation with the truth he left behind. The worst thing you could do to someone who gave you peace is to turn them into a lesson. Ion didn't raise his voice. He didn't call her names. He didn't even try to change her mind. He simply spoke the words that most people are too afraid to say. I know what you're doing, and I'm not a part of it anymore. Now, she lays awake in her bed, phone on her chest, heart pounding in echoes, not because he's texting, not because he's calling, but because he's not. And that silence, it says more than 1,000 apologies ever could. But this story isn't over. Because sometimes the ones you push away are the ones who rise so far above, you can't even reach them to say sorry. You can ignore someone's value. You can pretend their silence means nothing. But when they rise, when they walk away without a trace, something inside you shatters. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about becoming unforgettable without saying another word. Because sometimes the people you dismiss become the voice your soul can't unhear. Let's continue. Weeks had passed since that conversation. Zara's life, on the surface, remained the same. The same friends, the same apartment, the same morning coffee routines. But internally, nothing felt familiar anymore. She kept catching herself staring into the void, wondering where she went wrong, how she didn't see it coming. The sentence Ion said to her, "Maybe you're just upset because I'm not the one you can use anymore," played in loops. It echoed louder than any insult ever could, because it was rooted in a truth she could no longer bury. And then something happened. Ion changed. No, not into someone else. He simply returned to who he had been all along, before he dimmed his light to make others comfortable, before he bit his tongue to avoid hurting feelings. He embraced his brilliance. Fully, fiercely. His social media, once quiet, now overflowed with deep reflections, book quotes, and messages that inspire hundreds. People were listening, sharing, commenting. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't vague. He was evolving in front of the world. Zara watched from behind the screen, her heart sinking each time she saw his name trending among mutuals. Friends who once overlooked him were now admiring him, inviting him, applauding him. He had stepped into his power. And now everyone saw it. Meanwhile, she felt like a shadow of herself, because the person who once knew her best, who used to read between her words, had moved on without turning back. And with every moment of his silence, she felt more exposed, not because he told her secrets, but because he didn't need to. She had spent years trying to be seen by people who never really looked. Yet the one person who did, the one who knew her layers and still gave her grace, was now nowhere to be found. One night, overcome with guilt and desperation, she finally sent a message. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I miss how we used to talk. Please respond." She watched the ticks turn blue. He had seen it, but the reply never came. That was the real heartbreak. Not rejection, but irrelevance. Because when you finally realize someone's worth, and they no longer need your validation, you lose twice. Once for never valuing them, and again for realizing they no longer care that you do. Ion wasn't trying to make a statement. He wasn't plotting revenge. He was just done shrinking. He started giving talks, attending seminars, writing. The world saw his quiet fire and called it brilliance. But Zara? She saw it and called a mistake she couldn't undo. Her friends began asking her, "Didn't you two used to be close?" She would nod, smile faintly, and say, "Yeah, a long time ago." But inside, she was screaming. Because how do you explain that someone who once gave you everything now walks right past you like you're invisible? It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't pride. It was growth. And growth doesn't beg to be acknowledged by those who once overlooked it. Zara became haunted, not by his words, but by the reflection they left behind. She started questioning her patterns, her relationships, her habits, the way she dismissed those who loved quietly and celebrated those who showed off loudly. Regret does that to you. It humbles you. Meanwhile, Ion continued blooming. He helped strangers, mentored students, built communities. He wasn't showing off. He was showing up, finally, for himself. And though he never spoke her name again, Zara felt like every word he shared online was a mirror, one that forced her to see herself clearly, flaws, fears, and all. She tried reaching out once more, a final time. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I've changed. I really have. This time, there were no blue ticks, no read receipt, just silence, because some stories don't get rewritten. Some chapters close and never reopen. Zara now walked through life with Phantom, not a lost love, but a soul who once saw her better than she saw herself. And now that he was gone, she could see clearly, too. But clarity doesn't erase consequences. She had to live with the echo of a sentence that cost her peace. Maybe you're just upset because I'm not the one you can use anymore. Some truths don't scream. They whisper, and in the stillness of the night, when all else is quiet, they return louder than any voice. Zara now knew that, because someone like Ion doesn't explode. They evaporate from your life, from your comfort, from your illusions, and the emptiness they leave behind, it teaches you everything. So the next time someone gives you their silence, their time, their trust, value it. Because once they decide you're not worth the energy, they don't argue, they don't beg, they disappear. And you're left staring at a dark ceiling at 3 a.m., replaying the moment you broke someone who only ever wanted to see you rise. Someone, somewhere, still hasn't slept since you said it. And maybe that someone is you.